What's going on, family? I'm Scrapbook Boxing, the Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuffs series. I would like to ask you a question. What is pugilism? What is pugilism? What does it mean to you? I'll give you the short answer. Pugilism is a square-shaped object designed to assist with combat, such as your fist, or what we know today as the squared circle. You see, fisticuffs is an action that is designed to help assist one with grievances, to protect one's assets, or to take something from someone on a physical level. Boxing is one of the oldest traditions in the world of fisticuffs. It pretty much goes back to the beginning of time, but it is truly recognized in 1681. But why boxing is so relatable to everyone, old women, young kids, people in general, is because of what it represents. Domination, territorial, being a king of something. This goes back to BC, the Roman Emperor, the Greeks, and the Olympic Games. But what does boxing truly represent? Country, pride, money, and racism. I show you this image to give you a better understanding on what I'm telling you. The man laying on the ground as he tries to defend himself. And there's a man sitting on top of him with his right arm cocked and his left hand placed around the throat of the man laying down. Man sitting on him is ready to pound his face into jelly. You have two men who's standing above them. One is a Confederate soldier as he places his right hand in his left pocket. He's about to pull out a check in payment of what he believes might be the end. The man in a white jacket sits there smoking his pipe, realizing that he would have earned over 100 acres, 100,000 acres of land. Now, this is a fictional demonstration that I am giving you, but it's not far from the truth. This is what happens. As long as you have man, you will have domination. You will have one taking from someone else. Country, money, and racism. The pride comes from the two men who are engaging in the disrespect of one. How that disrespect came about, man in a white coat told the man who was sitting on top of the other man that the man laying down threatened to take the young ladies in your tribe and to take your land. The man laying on the ground knew nothing about this. This is how you get the wheels turning of one man disliking another man. You get the tall man disliking the short man, and the long-haired man disliking the short-haired man. You get one talking about the other until it gets out of control, and that's when you sit back and you wait for the money to roll in. because you place wages on the man. That happens today as it happened yesterday. It happens in the stock market. It happens when one is unable to make a payment in their home. And once the home becomes in a foreclosure state, you have a man waiting to purchase that for half the value and half the price that you paid for it. This is how, when I say country, that's how countries are run. By taking from others, taking others' oil, taking others' money, taking others' pride. It has always been that way. Racism. You get one man to dislike another man's skin color. You get him to dislike his ideology, get him to dislike his religion. Let me give you an example of what happened to the black fighters from the beginning of time. There's a black middleweight by the name of Alex Gibson. He was known as Kid Gibson. Stood 5'11", weighed 150 to 160 pounds, and he was managed by Odell Crump. He fought from October 4th, 1915 to March 23rd, 1929. April 11th, 1919, he had a 6-round draw with Joe Gans, who was known as Nobby Joe Gans. There were about 6 Joe Gans. Nobby Joe Gans was a lightweight, and he grew into a middleweight. This is what happened to black fighters coming up. They fought in all different weight divisions, sometimes 60 pounds heavier than what they were normally able to handle. It isn't that they chose to fight the man. The man was chosen for them. And I'll get into the different time of boxing when it was at its most brutal state. Eugene Bullard, born October 9th, 1894 in Columbus, Georgia. He died October 12th, 1961 in New York, and he stood 5'10", weighed 156 pounds, and he was managed by Dixie Kid. Who was Dixie Kid? He was the second black welterweight champion in boxing history, but what defined Dixie Kid? Dixie Kid was in a bout with the Barbados Demon Joe Walcott. 1904, a referee had waged on Dixie Kid, placed a bet on him, but he was the referee at the same time for that bout. And he waited till the 20th round as he took points away from Joe Walcott. He would then disqualify him when the bout was over because he wanted to make sure he didn't have to do so if it wasn't necessary, so it didn't seem as obvious. But it was clear that Joe Walcott won the bout, but he awarded Dixie Kid the bout. And he found out that he had placed a wager on Dixie Kid. Joe Walcott had to take on Mysterious Billy Smith to regain his crown. But the Dixie Kid was something else. He stayed at a boarding house owned by Shir Carter, a woman who housed other black fighters, such as Dudley Harris and Jim Johnson, Sam Langford, Frank Craig, and a fighter by the name of Sam Mito. I don't know if you heard of him. Dixie Kid would become the welterweight champion when he would defeat Barbados Demon Joe Walcott, 1904. Dixie Kid was arrested July 4th, 1902, while standing on a corner minding his own business. Racism. June 26, 1924, Larry Estes became the colored middleweight champion. He became champion in his hometown in Harlem, New York, when he would defeat Panama Joe Gans, better known as Cyril Quentin. Panama Joe Gans was managed by Leo P. Flynn, along with Kid Norfolk. But Larry Estridge was a southpaw. He had a bald head. He reminded me of Marvin Hagler. And how I know this story is because Larry Estridge himself told me that. He lived in the Bronx, New York. And I met him through my grandfather. Larry Estridge told me the story of what took place in the 1910s, 1920s, 1930s. He told me stories about black fighters who, in the South, couldn't use basic utensils. You see, Reconstruction, December 18th, 1865 to 1877, was the 13th Amendment to abolish slavery. Jim Crow, racial separation. Percy versus Ferguson, separate but not equal. You see, if you were in the black community, you could not drink out of the same water fountain. You couldn't use the same bathroom. You couldn't eat in the restaurants. And your child could not go to the same school. Brown versus Board of Education, 1954. The U.S. Supreme Court would decide that separating children and their education was unconstitutional. Black boxers. When they walked down the aisleway to a fight, there were spitballs shot out of straws at them. There was coffee, juice, and other beverages thrown at them. Half-eaten sandwiches thrown at them as they were walking to the ring. They couldn't change in locker rooms. They had to change in mop closets. They couldn't sleep in a hotel. They had to sleep in a car. When they rode in a train, they had to sit in the back of the train. And when they traveled far, they had to sleep with the animals in the back in hay and lay down and get some rest. Many of them had to hobo, meaning they had to hang upside down the train. Well, the train was doing over 65 miles per hour. I'm sure that iron was hot, but they couldn't let go because they would be crushed to pieces. They had to ride the back of the bus and pay the same fare. Larry Estes told me stories in the deep, deep South. How fighters would ride in the back of a wagon on uneven clay with a burlap bag over their head. And they would go deep into the woods, probably a mile from where they were placed into the wagon. And it was so dark in the woods that when the burlap bag was released from their head, they would see men hanging. They didn't know if those men were hanging because they were supposed to win or they were supposed to lose the bout. When they would climb into the ring, there would be 5 white men standing there with gloves on. They were there in preparation for who would be underneath the hood of the burlap bag. And once a man was selected, you had men on horses, one on each side of the ring with shotguns, pointing the entire time of the fight. You had fighters who would stand in ankle deep to knee deep water, marshland with water moccasins, while the other fighter would be on land. There was a huge pot of boiling water with men who would lose the bout, black fighters, that would be thrown in that pot of water. If you see the movie Mandingo, Ken Norton, you see, this is the story of boxing that you're not told. You would never, they're not going to put that in any history book. But this is what happened to the black fighter. To finish the story with Dixie Kid, he was standing on a corner and he was approached by a beat cop. And he was hit in the back of the head on South Street and Broad Street in Philadelphia. And when he hit the man back, he was arrested. He was hit in the back of the head with a blackjack. No defense for himself. I mentioned to you that Henry Armstrong, although a 3-weight division champion, when he fought in the West coming up, he could not change in locker rooms. He had to change in mop closets. I'm talking Henry Armstrong in his day. Dixie Kid was not only one who suffered those unfortunate circumstances. George Dixon, 1892, September 6, in the ring with Jack Skelly, was hit with whips and metal sticks to keep him in the center of the ring. They had long hickory wood sticks, poking him in the back, shoving him back into the middle of the ring, because they did not want the sweat of a black fighter flying on them. But that's how George Dixon became a zone fighter, a master of fighting in the middle of the ring. He discovered shadow boxing, speed bag, and a heavy bag. Joe Gans discovered the 1-2 combination punch. He mastered the jab. He was taught that by having meat hung in the back of the porch, attracting flies. And he became a master of catching flies. 3, 4, 5, 10 of them with one hand. Joe Gans was the first American black fighter to become lightweight champion. He was the first black fighter to become a lightweight champion. And he was the first resident of Baltimore to own a car. As you know, Jack Johnson became the first black established heavyweight champion in 1908. When Charlie Burley defeated Coco Kid in 1938, he became the first black fighter to accomplish that feat in Pittsburgh. That year was the greatest year in boxing history for the black fighter. Because in 1938, not only did you have Charlie Burley, now the colored middleweight champion, colored welterweight champion. He was the colored welterweight champion in 1938. We would also have Walker Smith winning the 1938 Metropolitan Bantamweight Championship belt. The last time it was done in a different weight division as a middleweight was in 1928, 10 years prior. And that was Harry Smith, the Harlem Thunderbolt. You see, racism has always been the money-making machine. Joe Louis was supposed to take on Turkey Thompson in 41. But they removed Turkey Thompson because they didn't want Joe Louis giving another black fighter an opportunity. Because he already did that with John Henry Lewis in 1939 in January. So in comes Billy Conn of Pittsburgh. John Henry Lewis was hustled out of his championship title when he took an eye examination test in 1938, and he couldn't defend it against Tiger Jack Fox, who was another black fighter, because the doctor stated he was unfit. So they stripped him of one of his titles. So then Milo Patina, who was a southpaw, he's from New York, Lincoln, New York. He would face Tiger Jack Fox. They would give the victory to Milo Patina. And then Billy Conn would now face Milo Patina and unify the light heavyweight championship title in 1938. He was champion in 39. He would take on Joe Louis in 41. Took on Joe Louis again in 46 after the war. Elmer Violent Ray, who took on Obie Walker 14 times, was to get a shot for Joe Louis's vacant title. He was deprived. Elmer Violent Ray would take on Jersey Joe Walcott in 47. Lost. And that's how Walcott got that shot with Joe Louis. So in 49, when Joe Louis would retire, he would place Ezzard Charles and Archie Moore. Ezzard Charles and Jersey Joe Walcott for his title. Ezzard Charles would defeat Walcott and he would become champion. And it would be solidified in 1950, New York Yankee Stadium against Joe Louis. Walcott would then knock out Ezzard Charles. And then he would lose by knockout against Rocky Marciano in 52. Charles would try to face Marciano twice in 54, and he would lose. One by decision, and the second time he would be stopped. But you had so many fighters who did not get the opportunity. You heard me talk about Ray Robinson and Black Murderers Row. Ray Robinson, and most people don't know this, after he turned professional in 40, and he was promised that opportunity by Angot, what happened was Black Murderers Row were trying to eat off of Ray Robinson because they were not getting the opportunities. And they were trying to use Ray Robinson's name because he was such a phenomenon to sell tickets. They were never going to give him an opportunity to fight for the title. This is similar to what happened with Devin Haney. And he was promised an opportunity, and behind his back, they had already planned not to give him a shot. Harold Johnson was very hungry in the locker room, and they gave him an orange that he injected. some drugs in, and he was woozy before the fight to the point where his back locked up. Do you know who he fought? He faced Jersey Joe Walcott. The same thing happened to his father, Phil Johnson. Here's what's ironic. Both men were knocked out in the third round. Both men was hit above the eye. Both men back locked up. And they were both knocked out by Jersey Joe Walcott. Henry Armstrong was trying to go for his fourth world title, the New York Sack. Did not allow a 10-round bout in New York's Madison Square Garden, so they had to find another house for it, and they found California. California was sanctioned a 10-round bout. They hired Jack Blake. Jack Blake would be the judge, the jury, and the executioner because he was the only man responsible for the bout. There were no judges. Why was that? Why was it that Eddie Mead, who was the manager, never came to the bout? He never listened to on the radio because he did not want to be questioned in case he was subpoenaed to come to court. Eddie Mead knew what was going to happen because he didn't want to be around in case Henry Armstrong knocked out Severino Garcia. Why is that important? Because Severino Garcia was going to be fighting Ken Overland. And Henry Armstrong was given some money to carry Garcia. So Eddie Mead didn't want no part of that, so he stayed home. He never listened to it on the radio. And when Armstrong was attempting to win the contest, he had already taken the money. So he couldn't knock out Garcia. Because if he did, there would be a switchblade in the locker room waiting for him. Or probably in the mop closet, depending upon where he was allowed to change clothes. So he had to go the distance. That gave George Blake the opportunity to take 5 rounds away from a man in a 10-round bout, making it a draw. This would allow Severino Garcia to hold on to his title. One of his titles was already safe because the New York Sack was not on the line because they did not sanction the 10-round bout. The only belt was on the line was the NBA, National Boxing Association. So even if some way, somehow, Armstrong would defeat Garcia, he would not be universally recognized as champion. You tell me. Charlie Burley was robbed several times. In 1938, he lost to Fizzy Civic. He didn't lose to Fizzy Civic. He turned around and defeated Civic in 1938 and defeated him again in 1939. Georgie Abrams did not have a draw with Burley. He wasn't able to defeat Coco Kid. They wanted him to fight Tony Zale. Tony Zale never gave any of the black fighters an opportunity for his middleweight championship title. Charlie Burley was in line to take on Tony Zale in 1946. Instead, they would give it to Graziano. You see, boxing has always been that way. Victor Valley, who sparred many rounds with Pancho Villa, told me in the locker room about this game. Country. Joe Louis and Max Schmeling met up in 1936. 38 was the biggest, in my opinion, boxing contest of its importance because you was dealing with two different countries. To the point where Roosevelt would call Lewis down to the White House. Met him in the lawn, he wouldn't allow him in the White House. And Adolf Hitler would call Max Schmeling into his chambers. Pride. During that time, you would have to kill a man before he would quit in the ring, because that didn't happen in the early days. Money. Many fighters were bought. Many fighters were threatened because hitmen were paid off to threaten a man, either to go the distance or not get in the ring with another fighter. The Black Murderers Row did not accept bribes, majority of them, and that's the reason why they didn't get their title shots. Ray Robinson didn't accept bribes, and that's the reason why he didn't fight Black Murderers Row, because he wasn't champion yet. When Robinson was a lightweight, he didn't get his opportunity with Sammy Ingat, Freddie Red Cochrane as welterweight, or Marty Servo as welterweight as well. He had to wait till 46 to fight Tommy Bell for the vacant crown. Ray Robinson told Charlie Burley in a restaurant, "Let me become champion first and we'll sort this out." Robinson was not champion, and they all wanted to fight him because he was a money-making machine and he was the meal ticket. That was the situation. I told you, get one man against another man if he's of the same race, but he has a different hair color, or he has a different height, or a different religion, and you use that as a manipulation tactic to get him to dislike him. That's boxing. I'm Scrapbook Boxing, Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuff series. All great fights and all great fighters will never be forgotten on my channel. I'll have another conversation like this. It's a conversation that is very important. You have to have thick skin, and you have to look at it for what it is if you're going to appreciate this game and understand it for what it is. Thanks for listening. Be well. Peace.